Hello, everybody. My name is Lauren Zimmerman. I own the Writer's Block Bookstore in Winter Park, Florida, where we now have our second location, which is in Winter Garden. So we opened up this week. So we're very excited about that. So today we're going to meet Shelby Mahurin. Am I pronouncing it right?
You are. Yep, Mahurin.
Who is the author of the new book, Blood and Honey. And it's a YA book, science fiction, fantasy, or maybe just fantasy. We're gonna get into this more about the book and the whole storyline and about fantasy books in general. And it's also the second book in a trilogy of books that are coming out. Their first one, which is The Serpent and the Dove, which was released in 2019, and I don't know when, in 2021 is when we're going to see the third one, which is going to be called Gods and Monsters. Mm-hmm. So thank you so much. So what I'd like to ask you to do before we start asking questions, I'd like you to do what I call like a little elevator pitch, kind of a description, but it's a little different though, because I think because this is the second in the book of a trilogy, I think we need to have a little bit more. I'd like to learn a little bit about the first book, and if you could just maybe talk about the characters, Reed and Lou, the two main characters, and their journey in the first book, and how, so that we don't have to worry about spoilers too much. And for those of you that haven't read the book, we'll try to keep the spoilers at minimum, but we almost need them to get onto the second book. But I will say that the first book, looking Serpents and Doves, got incredible reviews, such a huge fan base. I'm going to have to run out and read the first book myself. So great. And people were asking for the second book in the reviews. So a lot of the questions were you planning it to be a trilogy when you wrote the first book? So if you could go ahead and just talk a little bit about the characters and maybe their arc and their story, and where we're going with this.
Right, yeah. So Serpent and Dove follows Lou, who is my main character, one of two main characters. She is a witch who is on the run. She's hiding from someone. You don't learn who until later in the story. Someone very powerful. And in doing so, she crosses paths with Reed, who is a witch hunter. He is my other protagonist. And through a series of very unfortunate events, they find themselves married. He does not know that she's a witch. So there's lots of tension there. They have totally different worldviews. Obviously, Lou is very irreverent. She is sort of wild. She's outspoken. She's crass. Whereas Reed is her polar opposite. He is loyal. He's determined. He sees everything very black and white. He's devoted to his cause and his church, and his cause is to eradicate people like Lou. He doesn't know that she's a witch, but so the Serpent and Dove follows them sort of falling in love and re-examining their worldviews, all while trying to avoid this foe who makes him or herself known by the end of the book. And then Blood and Honey is the sequel to Serpent and Dove, and it continues to follow Lou and Reed as they run from this foe. And not just this foe, many other foes that they have made throughout the course of book one. Literally everybody in the kingdom is after them in book two, and they have realized that they need to reanalyze their strategy in winning this really war. And to win the war, they need to gather allies. So Blood and Honey is very much a quest book. They are traveling the kingdom, and they are meeting all kinds of new magical creatures and trying to persuade them to join them in this epic battle that is to come.
Foe. So does the foe have a name?
They do. I mean, if you've read Serpent and Dove, you know who it is. Should I spoil it if they haven't read Serpent and Dove?
I don't know. That's a good
I'll
question.
just say the foe is within Lou's coven. So
the foe is a witch.
The foe is a witch.
Okay, so that we know that. So that's what we know. And then so now, well, that's an interesting plot because he's a witch hunter, and she's one, and they've kind of like reversed themselves. They should have been against one another, but they're working together against this common foe that is now, it causes probably a lot for her to be conflicted, which is probably a lot of it's in the storyline. So that, so that's the part that I'm looking forward to really developing. One of I'm just going to come out with the first question that I thought of. So I was reading, I did some research about the book and the trilogy and the first book, and read the reviews for both. And some of the reviews were talking about it being fan fiction. So, and I, being an old lady that I am, not really understanding the term fan fiction in a different way. I mean, I know the dictionary definition, but the reason that I was curious about it, and actually asked my daughter, who is a fantasy guru, about it, it was that I was seeing it written in a positive, complimentary way. And sometimes I've heard of fan fiction not necessarily being so complimentary. And so I asked her, what does it mean? And so we kind of, without just I told her about the plot, saying, well, it's what are they what fan fiction are they referencing is what I want to understand. Is it a Twilight? I mean, like I was just, and maybe I'm just going down the wrong path because I'm just an old person and doesn't understand fan fiction. But what was your interpretation of the comments that were made about, where they're trying to bring some analogies to the story? And I must say, it was, every time I saw that, I saw it as a compliment. I never saw it as a negative. And so that's what Lily was saying to me, because it's not really a negative. There's a whole thing of this type of fan fiction. I said, well, where does it originate? I mean, does it begin with Romeo and Juliet? I mean, it's like, so if you could kind of explain that to me, I think it'd be really interesting to those of us that really don't understand it very well.
Yeah, definitely. So, nothing in particular inspired Serpent and Dove, like as in it's not a fan fiction of like a Twilight or something like that. There was a moment in actually Outlander, when they're in season 2 in France, where Jamie calls Claire a La Dame Blanche, or the White Lady. And I was very interested in that. So there's inspiration there. But really, Serpent and Dove, and I think this is what people mean when they say that it reminds them of fan fiction, is that Serpent and Dove is kind of an ode to tropes that I love. So tropes are things that are done commonly and or done a lot, because people love them, right? That's why a trope is a trope. So the tropes that I wrote into Serpent and Dove are ones that I love, like enemies to lovers. Lou and Reed they hate each other at first and then they fall in love. The arranged forced marriage, which is like a forced proximity, which is especially fun with enemies to lovers because they have to be around each other. Forbidden romance is another trope that's played in because she's a witch and he's a witch hunter and it's kind of taboo. So I think that's what they mean when they say fan fiction-y, is just that it is rich in tropes, which a lot of authors do try to shy away from that, because tropes are overdone. But for me, it was all about taking the tropes that I love and sort of flipping them and, looking at it in a different way. So that's how I approach Serpent and Dove.
That's perfect. That's perfect. And speaking of that was one of the questions that I was going to have, was about the arranged marriage. So can you talk about that without giving too much away? Like, why would they be in a situation where they were forced to be married? Is that?
So yeah, there is a situation that it sort of incites their marriage. I don't want to get too spoilery with it, but there is a specific situation where all of the pieces kind of fall into place, where they are in a public situation. He is a man of the church, and it's a compromising situation. And his forefather, the Archbishop, who is one of our villains, he has a special interest in Lou that we don't realize what it is until later. He sort of manipulates the whole thing so that they have to get married to save Reed's reputation, and also so that he can keep a closer eye on Lou, our witch.
So it's not his intentions were not necessarily pure, that he had his own agenda in forcing these two star-crossed lovers.
Yes.
Oh, that's pretty cool. And then they do eventually fall in love, and then they go after a common enemy. So so there's suspense in it too. A lot of suspense.
There's a lot going on behind the scenes that our main characters don't actually, they find out throughout the course of the book, but they don't have that knowledge up front.
Does the reader have the knowledge up front of some of the stuff?
No. They learn with the main characters.
So let's see, Andy. So there was something, magic and self-destructive behaviors. So there was Lou, I guess Lou, the female, the protagonist, she's
very self-destructive.
So very self-destructive. So what are some of the situations? So does it have to do with her being a witch and just her own identity crisis that she has with herself? And
it happens. Her self-destructive behaviors really hit a peak in Blood and Honey. She starts spiraling. She goes down a path that she shouldn't go down. And it has to do with her being a witch, but not like just because she's a witch. The magic system that I constructed in Serpent and Dove obviously goes into Blood and Honey. So our witches, in order to have magic and to cast magic, they have to give something up in order to get something. And it's an immediate thing. So one of the first examples we see of magic in Serpent and Dove is when Lou is trying to break into this townhouse, and there's a lock on the gate. And so to break the lock, she breaks her finger. And she didn't have to break her finger. She could have also broken a relationship with one of her friends by like insulting them. So each witch sees different, they're called patterns. They're like golden threads that she can see and she can pull and manipulate. But she gets to decide, what she wants to break that lock. So there's an immediate consequence for magic. And in Blood and Honey, the stakes are a lot higher. They have more enemies. She has more people that she cares about, which is important. In Serpent and Dove, she has one other person besides herself who she's looking out for. And Blood and Honey, she suddenly has 4 or 5 besides herself who she's trying to take care of in these life and death situations. So she is using magic at a higher level, which means that she has to give up more. So she is really harming herself and saving other people. It's kind of her magic is kind of weaponized, but it's also used as a weapon against her. So for example, she's giving up memories, she's giving up certain emotions, she's giving up all of these things that sort of make her who she is. And we see the result of that in Blood and Honey.
So that's really interesting. So what about Reed through all of this? Like, while all this is happening and I don't want to spoil it by asking whether he now knows whether or not she's a witch. We'll not talk about that, but he's also witnessing her behaviors. And so is he confused? Is he concerned? Is he
very concerned?
Standing?
Blood and Honey, he's very concerned. He has done something at the end of Serpent and Dove that he is dealing with, the consequences of his actions. So he is trying to juggle that and also watch, the love of his life start making some decisions that she shouldn't make. And he feels like he's losing her, because she's not really acting like herself anymore. So, but there's also that thread that he was a witch hunter and he had these beliefs. So obviously she isn't going to take his criticism super seriously. She's going to see it more as, you're just not accepting me because I'm a witch, whereas he's seeing it as, no, you're hurting yourself. Stop.
Right.
So there's tension in the relationship there too. But yeah, Reed is very concerned in Blood and Honey.
So I see how you brought some spirituality into this, because he's religious. Is this in modern time, or is it when does it take place?
The year isn't specified. It's a medieval time period, yeah, and the kingdom in which they live is inspired by medieval France. It is not medieval France. It's just inspired by medieval France and the witch burnings and the power of the Catholic Church.
So is it a Protestant type of religion, spirituality he has?
It's Catholicism, like the Roman Catholicism.
Catholicism.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So he's looking at now enforcing his own spiritual beliefs about good and evil, right?
he is less enforcing in Blood and Honey than he was in Serpent and Dove. He's really the one who is re-examining his worldview because of Lou. Because he has fallen in love with this witch who is evil according to his
Right.
worldview. So I think a lot of people were irritated with Reed and Blood and Honey, and I understand, but I also, Reed has been through a lot. Reed has totally thrown all of his beliefs out the window just for Lou, and then Lou starts doing things that she shouldn't do, you know. So he is spirituality definitely plays a role, but his is more refinding his spirituality. Like, what do I believe? Like, I have all of these things in front of me. Okay, now I have to make sense of it.
Right. Yeah. So I can see how that it's probably what is enabling him to try to make sense of it. Like if he threw all of his religious beliefs out the window, then there it truly wouldn't make any sense to anybody, or to maybe to the reader.
Mm-hmm.
It's an important component because it reminds me of, you know, Wicked, the play about the witch, where
Mm-hmm.
we're all led to believe that she's evil, but you know, but
There's
in
more to
turn
the story than that. Yeah.
she wasn't, you know, and that it's all perception, it's all perceptions and how you use your powers that you're given, more so than any kind of like Harry Potter type of thing. Like I don't really see that too much in that, but I saw it in Wicked when I saw the play, that there was a lot of where she had to make a lot of decisions to save, you know, to try to do what she felt was right. So I guess
For Lou's at Blood and Honey.
for Lou, you know, her moral compass is intact, even though she's doing some self-destructive things to hurt herself, but she's trying to follow her own compass.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
She's definitely an anti-hero. She is not a typical white
I
white
I
knight.
like anti-heroes because
Yeah.
I can, it's funny, just for a personal note, I can always identify people in my relationships, my family and my friends, and, you know, people that I've known a really long time, where, you know, someone may come off as being angelic or perfect, but in reality, they're not that person, or people that you know that have been discriminated against or stereotyped against, or people prejudge them too quickly, and then they turn out to be, you know, decent people. And so it's all about perceptions and our own worldviews.
I
And so
really like playing with that. And
I always get a kick because when I read, I already have in my head, I'm already thinking of someone, a real person, like, oh, you know, it's like that real person that I have in my life. So, you know, I like that. So I want to ask you some questions, just, you know, burning questions that people always like to ask, you know, authors just in general. So what are you, I know that we're in COVID now, but was the first book your debut book? So your debut, and this is your second. What do you do otherwise, other than write? Maybe right now you're writing full time, but
I am writing full time now. I used to be a professional photographer, actually. I would photograph weddings and families and babies and all of it. And I still love to do that. I was actually just taking pictures this morning for different reasons, but yeah, I love photography so much.
and then what was your degree in college?
I graduated with a bachelor's in marketing.
So there's hope for my daughter. You know, it's like there's a lot of authors too that, I guess 50% of the time they'll say English, right?
Yeah, I started English, and then my very loving, well-meaning parents, and I do not begrudge them this at all, said, "What are you going to do with that?" And I said, "I don't know." And they said, "Do you want to teach?" And I said, "No." I actually tried. For a semester I did secondary education, so high school English, and I was like, I can't do this. So my dad said, "Well, may I suggest something very
Back up a
versatile,
career.
like business?" And I was like, "Okay, I'll try it." And then within that, I found the niche of like marketing, which was still creative,
Right.
but still business.
Yeah.
You don't
That's
have to go
good
to
though.
school to be a writer to be a writer.
Yeah. No, you don't have to be a writer to be a writer. You don't have, yeah. Get the editors to help you with the grammar, and it's just,
Yeah.
you're only as you just have the power of your imagination,
Yep.
and also perseverance. So as being a writer, speaking of that, explain the whole process. Like, I think what our audience and our readers don't understand is how long it takes to write a book and to get it published. And, you know, me, just finishing it is a feat upon itself. I mean, it's, and then just even being able to get it to the, you know, to market, or to get it to get in the eyes of a publisher that wants to support it and back it. It's amazing. I always think that I compare authors to, you know, actors and musicians, that there's so many talented authors out there. And you might be the best author in the world, but if you don't have if you don't have the perseverance, if you don't have the patience for it, or the patience for the business aspect, or the marketing, or the publishing aspect, which I know is probably the least favorite for an author many times, because they want to stay in that creative mode. They want to be always creative, and at some point creativity stops. So could you explain like the whole process, like how it started and how long it took? And
Yeah, so my journey to publication was a little bit different than other people's, but I can go through it. I started Serpent and Dove. It was the first manuscript that I finished. I had started a book before and I did not finish it. It was a hot mess. It was like angels and demons, and it just got really, really messy, really, really fast. And I didn't know what to do with it. And I had just had my second child. He was 3 months old, and I was just eye deep in diapers and nursing and formula, and it was, I just felt, I didn't feel like myself anymore. I felt like their mom.
Mhm.
I had sort of lost my identity as a human being outside of being a mother. And so I was sort of adrift, and that's when I started Serpent and Dove. I started writing it in January of 2017. And I think it took me 6 months to write it, which is a very short amount of time for me now. It takes me forever to write a book now, but I was writing every single night. I actually started on Wattpad. Have you heard of Wattpad?
Mhm.
Yeah, I started uploading a chapter per week. I had like 10 readers maybe who would come and read it every week. But I finished it for them. They helped hold me accountable. So I finished it in about 6 months, and there was a well-meaning reader who made a comment. She said, "I'm not ever going to post my real stories on Wattpad because I won't be able to get them traditionally published if I do." And I was like, "Oh, is that how that works?" And that sort of started me on my journey to researching how to get published traditionally. And when I say traditional publishing, I mean published by a publishing house in New York City, like HarperCollins, Penguin Random House, Hatchet,
As opposed to self-published or small press. Well, it can
Yes,
still be a
exactly.
small press, even though it's a big
Mhm.
publishing. You can still work
Yeah.
with,
So
I
I
guess.
I I bought a book that was like, I can't remember what it's called. It comes out every year. It's an annual publication with like 2007, like mine was 2017 Guide to Literary Agents, I think, because to traditionally publish, you have to have a literary agent to represent your work. They are the people who live in New York City who have relationships with editors at those publishing houses that I just mentioned. So they can get your book in front of those editors. So as I was reading this book, at the back, they mentioned pitching contests, specifically on Twitter, like Pit Mad and DV Pit, which I couldn't participate in. But Pit Mad, I was like, huh, this is interesting. And then one step further was Pitch Wars, which is how I got my agent. Pitch Wars is a mentorship they don't like to call it a competition anymore. It's a mentorship that you apply for to work with someone further along in the process than you. So maybe an agent writer, or maybe a published author. Just somebody who's further along and has a knowledge of the industry that you don't have. You work with them for a couple months if they choose you and your manuscript, and you revise with them. And then at the end of the mentorship, there's what is called the agent round, which is where hundreds of agents from, like we talked about earlier, they come in and they look at your pitch, which is just a short little like
Right.
key summary of your book, and then like your first however many words of your manuscript, and they will comment if they want to see more. So basically, Pitch Wars was a way to avoid. Sorry, my dog's down here. She wants pet. She's like, my computer's falling over. Pitch Wars is a way to avoid the slush pile, which is what agents call the queries that they receive. Queries is just like a sales pitch of your book, and anyway, it was just a way to
Mhm.
avoid that and to get my manuscript right in front of their face quickly. I was very fortunate. I did get chosen to work with Jamie Howard was my mentor, and I revised with her for, I think back then it was only 1 month. I don't know. I rewrote the entire book. It was my first taste of like real revision. So I added a point of view to the entire book. Reed's point of view wasn't in there initially. It was just told from Lou's point of view. And I switched from third to first person. I eliminated something like 7, 8, 9 side characters. I added some twists. It was a total rewrite. And then during the agent round, I did receive some agent requests. I queried them. And from that, I signed with my agent, Sarah Landis. At Sterling Lord Literistic, and I revised again with her. So there was 3 rounds of revisions with my Pitch Wars mentor, another 3 rounds with my agent before we went on what is called submission. And that is when she sends my book out to editors who she thinks would be interested in it at different publishing houses. So I was very lucky in that I was only on submission for 2 weeks, I think, a week or 2, I can't remember, before my editor at Harper Teen, that's my publisher, offered what is called a preempt, which is they say, we love this book. We're going to pay you a little bit more money for it if you agree to give us an answer within 24 hours, and we will not go to auction with it. Auction is when multiple publishing houses are interested and they just drive up the price. So we obviously accepted. I was over the moon, thrilled, ecstatic. And when I had my phone call with my editor, she said, yeah, we're thinking about publishing Serpent and Dove in September of 2019. So the timeline was I started writing it in December. I finished January 2017. I finished in the middle of 2017. I signed with my agent at the end of 2017, sold to Harper Teen in January of 2018. And she said, we're not going to publish until September of 2019.
So
So
a
that was
year.
a whole year and a half. And I was like, oh my God, what? Like
That's what happens.
forever away. Yeah. And we needed every single moment of that time because I revised with her 3 more times. So that's like 3, 6, 9 times. And then we had to then you send your book to copy edits, which is another round of revisions with a copy editor, and then another round with proofreaders. And then the book goes to print. But I mean, it truly blew my mind just how long
Yes.
everything took.
Yes.
And I was so lucky. It went fast for me.
Yeah,
There
it
are
did.
lots of people who it takes even longer. So
Yeah.
it's a wild
Yeah,
ride.
it's amazing. Like, and and when you find when the publisher finally buys it, what I've always thought was really interesting is how far out they do it. Like they have their system, because they'll say it'll be a year to 18 months. Because it gets in the pike. It's an industry, it's huge, and they decide how many books a year they're going to publish. And
And what seasons they're going to
what
publish.
season. And so 2000, when they bought it in 2018, they had to look and see what season in 2019 they wanted to put it in, because it can't conflict with marketing efforts for,
Other
other
books.
things. And it's almost like putting out a movie,
Yeah, it's like they have to fit it all together.
they have to fit it all together, and then for you as the author, that's where I think a lot of the other authors that I've talked to forget about it. I mean, like, because it's a long, I mean, there's time when they come back and they say, okay, the copy editor wants you to make these, but then it'd be another, 6 weeks, and then you get it, then they reach out and say, okay, now we want you to do this. And then 4 months goes by, and it's like, and then finally when they say, okay, here's the hard copy, it's like, God, I haven't thought about this book in 3 months.
I know, it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
like by the time I published Blood and Honey, I was already like halfway through Gods and Monsters, and I was like, Blood and Honey. It's like, I can't focus on Blood and Honey right now. I have to focus on Gods and Monsters, but you can't. You have to promote the book as it comes
Right.
out and still be looking forward to your next book, which
So
can be hard to sort of juggle that too.
So you're finished with Gods and
I'm
Monsters?
not. I am not. I should be, but I'm not. My editor, my lovely, lovely editor, she extended my deadline to it's a soft deadline for like the beginning of December. It's soft in that we don't have a specific date. It's hard as in it needs to be done by this time because she's extended it so much. But I am almost done with it. I'm actually I've been on my Instagram, I've been sort of going through my deadline process with everybody. I am like 92,000 words into Gods and Monsters, so I'm almost done with it, but I envision it being just a monstrous book. So I'm shooting for
The end,
where,
right?
yeah, between like 120, 130,000 words for this book, which is a lot. Most YA fantasies, you want to keep under 100,000. And that's like max. But these books have just been really big. Even
Well,
Serpent Dove was over 100,000, and this is the third book in a series. You know, like you have to wrap up all those threads.
you have to wrap up everything, and I guess the you know, now that you've been through the editing process twice, you can kind of count on maybe losing some things. Like you're at the throw in the kitchen sink stage,
Yes,
hoping that your editors and your copywriters and will kind of guide you into what areas to cut or to
I
streamline.
am very much
Counting on that.
counting on, yeah. Erica is my editor's name, and she helped me. Blood and Honey was really, really long, and she helped me sort of in the middle. There were parts that the pacing wasn't quite right, and we can cut this, and we can cut this, and maybe we cut just this part, and
Yeah,
we got it down to like still way really long, but like reasonable at least. That's what I'm hoping happens with Gods and Monsters too.
I think so. Yeah. So what is your space like, your writing space? I know you mentioned that you have a couple of kids. Do you have like a little office, or
I do
how
now. We recently moved to a bigger house because we were in this tiny little house with 3 kids. My husband is 6'10", so my kids are huge for their age. And I was going, like I was losing it. So we moved to a bigger house, and in this house, I'm actually in my office right now. We just finished sort of like redoing it. We put this wallpaper up because I loved it. It's kind of my space. He's allowed to
Yeah.
come in here too if he wants to like work, but we've got a nice couch here. I've got my desk over there. I'm actually doing an office tour with Epic Reads, my publisher's marketing sort of department, and I'll post that on my Instagram as soon as
So are you gonna, it's not live, like how are they doing Epic Reads now? Is it live?
We're doing a lot of virtual events with Epic Reads, and the office tour, they just gave me a shot list of things that I needed to film myself, and then I sent all of, and like a B-roll, you know, and then I sent all of it to them. They have video like professionals who will splice it all together and make it look professional.
Oh, an office tour, like your office. So it's an office tour
Yeah.
that,
Yeah,
oh
that's
yeah,
what they wanted. They're doing
yeah,
it
yeah,
like
yeah,
like writer's room. They did the
yes.
Victoria Aveyard. And so that's what I meant by office tour. Yeah. So it's kind of a mess
No,
right now, or I would just spin my computer around and let you see it, but
no, well, I'll just wait for the office tour.
okay.
Because I think that that's where it's heading right now, until we can have the opportunity to see one another in person again, is to
Yeah.
just, you know, to
That
have
ever
conversations. I think it's going to happen. You know, I mean, in the beginning of the pandemic, you know, everybody was doing the Zoom, and even I thought that it was good in a way, because there were authors that I couldn't have gotten,
Yeah.
you know, if for to Florida, you know, people that are out in California or wherever. But after doing it for the last 6 or 7 months, nothing beats live. I mean, you can't, it's just the audience is not there, the reader's not there.
Well, I
And
think
so I know that
we're getting desensitized to it, right? Like at the beginning of the pandemic, it was incredibly useful. I was able to participate in things that I never would have gotten to participate in because I live in the middle of Indiana, you know? And there
right.
were people who were able to watch my events that couldn't ever watch
Like
them.
me, like nobody from Indiana goes to Florida.
Yeah,
They don't,
exactly.
I don't know how to,
You know,
they don't know how to get there. You know, it's like we have to fly to Chicago and then come.
it's true. There's not a good way to do it. And I hate flying to Chicago. Oh, it's the worst. Anyway, but yeah, like now it's been almost a year. And they are so accessible that it's hard to sort of attract a crowd now,
I
because,
think so.
and especially most lives are available after the fact too, which is fine because of different time zones. So like
Right.
drawing just live viewers is, I think, getting really
Yeah,
hard.
that's what I'm assessing. So what has been one of your most rewarding experiences as an author in terms of connecting to your fan base, to your readers?
Every single time that I am tagged in fan art, I just die a little inside of happiness. Like it's my absolute favorite thing. Same with cosplays. When cosplayers dress up as Lou or Reed or Coco, it just makes me so happy because I know that those readers connected to the book. I know that the book found its audience in those readers because they're taking the time to create these just incredible artwork, this incredible artwork, or they're taking the time to buy wigs and do their makeup and buy outfits to dress up like my characters. It's just so surreal, but incredibly satisfying.
So for those of us that aren't familiar with fan art and Cosmos, could you describe that a little bit so that we can maybe look for it? Are these Instagram accounts or what are they?
So it's just I am predominantly on Instagram, so that's where I see all of it. But it's just artists. A lot of artists have Instagram accounts just for their art, and particularly just for like book art, where they draw characters from their favorite books. So I actually have a highlight on my Instagram account with fan art, Serpent Dove fan art, if you wanted to go look at it.
Yeah, we will.
Incredible. And then cosplayers are just, they're people in the bookish community who dress up like their favorite characters. So instead of drawing or painting them, they literally use their body as the artwork, and then they
Oh
take
my
pictures
God.
of it. Yeah, so they actually like become Lou in these pictures, you know, with the gold. I mentioned earlier the golden threads, and Lou has a scar across her throat. She's got freckles across her nose, and they'll like make sure to do all of those details. It's really, really cool.
Is
It's
it like a hashtag? Like if I wanted, would I just Google cosplayers and the name of your book? And how would I find it?
You could if they use those hashtags, but I also have a highlight reel on my Instagram of cosplayers too, so you can look at them there too. A lot of times if you go to my tagged photos on Instagram, you'll be able to see a lot of artwork for my characters and cosplays of my characters, because they do tend to tag me in them so that I can see them.
So that, but most of it is happening in Instagram. Most of all this is
Yeah,
happening.
that's where I see it. I'm not really on Twitter or Facebook. As I mean, I have accounts, but I'm not active on them. But yeah, because the art is artwork, it's like pictures, and because the cosplayers take pictures of themselves, I think it's a bigger deal on Instagram than it is on the other platforms.
Very cool. Well, I'm gonna look into that. We're gonna include some of your cos art when we
Yeah, definitely.
when we promote this.
Cool.
Isn't that a great idea? I think that'll be great.
Yeah.
So let's see, I've got a list of, okay. Do you hide secrets in your books that only a few people will find? Like, do you have little things that you hide in there? Friends of yours will get it?
Yeah. Especially in Serpent Dove, I'm a big fan of The Office.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, so I have a couple of like Easter eggs that people, if they're looking, might be able to find from The Office and Serpent Dove. Not as much in Blood and Honey.
I'm going to have to get the first book for my other daughter. She's in New York right now. And she's a big fan of she's a reader, and she's a big fan of The Office. And
she'll probably find them then.
And so, yeah, so I'm going to get that book for her because I think she would love that. If you could travel through time, when and where would you go?
This question's so hard because I have actually thought about this. I've watched Outlander. Okay. I've read the first book at least. So I have thought about this question, and I don't know if I would travel back in time, just because women are not treated like they are today.
Yeah.
That equality isn't there. And I don't know if Outlander scared me, but like just walking down the street, like, and having the risk of somebody assaulting you, scares me.
Yeah.
Like I don't want anything to do with that. If I had to pick though, I would probably go back in time in Scotland, not because of Outlander, kind of because of Outlander, but I did the ancestry DNA test where you like send in your saliva and they tell you where you're from. And I'm actually predominantly Scottish, which I did not know. So I'm like, that could be cool to kind of like go back and try to find my ancestors.
But Shelby is kind of that's a Scottish, that could almost be a Scottish name.
Yeah. So we actually, my family, my maiden name is one of the most common names over in the UK. So like England and Wales. And I thought that we were predominantly Welsh, and we are. Like those percentages were there. I was actually like Scottish, and then like the United Kingdom's like English. So and then Irish. But yeah, definitely I have that the names going for me.
Let's see if I have any other. Okay, so this is my final question. Okay. What is the main thing you would like readers to take away from your book? books plural. Like if we look, because let's just talk about it as a trilogy, like the first and the second, and hopefully next year, after we finish reading the first two, we'll be thinking about the third one already, like Outlander, where they make us wait 2 years for the next one. But what would you like for people to take away from this series?
You know, when I sat down to write these books, I didn't have some grand message in mind. I wanted them to be like an escape for people. They were an escape for me, so I kind of wanted to offer escapism to my readers. But as I was writing them, one theme did become predominant, and I don't know if it was cathartic or what for me, but the main lesson that my characters learn is that love conquers all. And it's cliched and it's kind of tropey, but truly, you know, they live in a world that has just been torn apart by war and by hatred and bias and discrimination, and through their love of each other, they learn to re-examine how they see everything. And that's probably the biggest theme.
That's cool. One last question, because I just remembered. So have you started your thoughts on the next book after you finish The Monsters? Are you ready for that?
Yes, I have. Actually, I haven't talked to my editor. I have 2 ideas. And she's gonna have to weigh in about which one I write, but I am very, very excited. It's gonna be bittersweet to move on from these characters. I've been writing them since 2017, you know. But I'm also ready to kind of like play in new worlds with new characters. So
Yeah.
I do have
You're going to stay in the fantasy world.
Yes. Yeah. I don't think that I will ever really branch out into like contemporary. I don't really read contemporary. So it would be hard to write it. Maybe paranormal. I could write a paranormal book. I like reading paranormal. I'm obsessed with vampires and like all of the creatures. So I could see myself doing that someday. But definitely it'll stay in a speculative realm. All of my work will.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. It's so great to meet you. And I'm excited about the next book, and I'm excited about hopefully meeting at when the book conferences start up, you know, and someday, and you know, and the success of this book, and really means a lot to me to help promote the book. I love authors so much. And so we'll do everything to try to get readers to fall in love with these characters. So thank you so much
for having me. Indie Books.
Oh, absolutely.
You guys make the dream come true.
Thank you. Absolutely.